Welcome back to another deep dive. And, when we look back at history, we're really heavily conditioned to look for, like, a clean timeline.
Oh, absolutely. We want the dates, the exact sequence of
Right,
events.
exactly. We want the unquestionable cause and effect. It's like we treat history like this ledger that just simply needs to be balanced.
Yeah, but when you step into the world of ancient exegetical literature, and
Mm.
specifically texts dealing with, revelation and prophecy, that whole ledger concept just completely falls apart.
It really does. Suddenly you're looking at this landscape that just does not care about our modern obsession with literal material timelines.
No, not at all. It cares about psychological truth, theological weight, and really just the absolute limits of human endurance.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today, because the texts we're examining for this deep dive, they fundamentally reject the idea that history is just, a series of things that happened.
Right. In this framework, history is an active, malleable tool. It's used to test and break and ultimately rebuild the human psyche.
And the specific stack of sources we are pulling from today is this really curated collection of excerpts from classical Islamic exegetical texts, which are known as tafsir.
Yeah, and our focal point for this deep dive is the prophetic traditions surrounding the Holy House, or Beit al-Maqdis, which is Jerusalem.
And look, just to be absolutely clear up front to you listening, the goal of this deep dive is not to, like, authenticate these accounts as material history.
Right, nor are we here to endorse or debate the specific theologies of Islam, Judaism, or Christianity that all kind of intersect in these narratives.
Exactly. We are just treating these sources impartially as a window into a highly specific, highly complex worldview. We want to unpack what the text actually
We
says.
want to look at how they construct meaning,
Yeah.
Like what do these sweeping miracles and terrifying punishments actually reveal about the human condition?
Because we're looking at this really intense human struggle with divine authority, the crushing burden of absolute proof, and this is a big one, the incredible elasticity of time.
So to understand that struggle, we really have to start at the geographic and spiritual epicenter of these early communities, which is the Qibla.
Right, the direction of prayer.
Exactly. The sources detail this period of roughly 16 to 17 months immediately following the arrival of the Prophet Muhammad and the early Muslim community in Medina.
And during this entire period, their prescribed direction for daily prayer was north, facing Jerusalem.
Yeah, and geographically and socially, this is a highly, highly charged orientation.
Oh, massively. Because Medina is a really complex city at this time. It's
Yeah.
heavily populated by various tribes, including these deeply established Jewish communities.
Right, for whom Jerusalem is already the ultimate sacred center.
Exactly. So by praying toward Jerusalem, the early Muslims are participating in this shared spatial reverence, I guess you could call it.
But the texts paint this picture of a profound, agonizing internal tension within the Prophet Muhammad himself during this time.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because he is physically aligning his body with Jerusalem, right?
Right, but the sources describe him constantly looking up at the sky, yearning for divine permission to turn south, to face the Kaaba in Mecca.
Which these traditions identify as the original sanctuary built by Abraham.
Exactly. And the phrasing of the text is quite evocative. It notes his face like physically turning to the heaven, waiting for a revelation.
It sets up this really fascinating dichotomy between physical compliance and spiritual orientation.
Yeah, he's obeying the current directive, but his heart is anchored completely elsewhere.
And when the directive finally does arrive, when the revelation comes down commanding the community to shift their Qibla 180 degrees to face Mecca, it just triggers a catastrophic social fracture within Medina.
Oh, completely. Because, think about the physical reorientation of that.
Right. Imagine standing in a congregation right in the middle of this deeply ingrained daily ritual, and suddenly you're told to physically turn your back on the direction you've faced your entire life.
It's huge. And the texts are very transparent about the fact that this provided massive political and social ammunition to basically every single opposing faction in the city.
Yeah, the text carefully categorizes this resulting fallout, almost like a sociological study of resistance, really.
What's fascinating here is how it breaks down the groups. First, you have the Jewish tribes in the region.
Right, and according to the tafsir, their reaction was this mixture of validation and then sudden betrayal.
Exactly. Because as long as Muhammad faced Jerusalem, there was this sense that he was adhering to their established sacred geography.
The texts actually record them claiming that He was essentially unguided until they provided the true direction.
Right, so the sudden pivot away from Jerusalem was immediately interpreted as a direct theological rejection.
And then on the flip side, you have the polytheists, the pagans, back in Mecca, watching this whole thing unfold.
And their reaction, according to the sources, is just pure mockery.
Yeah, they look at this sudden shift and they just read it as capitulation.
They argue that, well, if he's turning his face back toward our city, it's only a matter of time before his entire movement collapses,
Yeah.
and he just goes back to worshiping their idols.
Right. They view the shift in Qibla not as some divine command, but just as a symptom of ideological weakness. Like, he's just confused.
But the most dangerous fracture, according to the text, actually happens internally.
Yeah. The faction the texts refer to as the hypocrites.
Right, or those with, quote, disease in their hearts. For them, this physical pivot just unravels their entire theological foundation.
And the questions they raise are, I mean, honestly, entirely logical from a human perspective.
Absolutely. They ask if Mecca is the correct direction now, were the last 16 months of prayer just completely invalid?
Right. And what about the members of our community who died while praying toward Jerusalem? Did they die in error?
It essentially creates a hurricane of existential doubt.
Which, I have to say, raises a massive question about the strategy of this early movement.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, if the overarching goal of a brand new, nascent community is cohesion and stability and finding common ground with neighbors, why introduce a change that deliberately alienates your neighbors?
Right, and invites mockery from your enemies.
Exactly. And causes your own followers to question the validity of their past actions. It seems like strategic self-sabotage.
Well, if you evaluate this through the lens of modern community building or, public relations, it's a total disaster.
Oh, PR would be having a meltdown.
Totally. But the text operates on a completely inverted value system. The sources don't hide the difficulty. They actually highlight it.
Yeah, they use a very specific word, right?
Yes, they explicitly use the Arabic word kabira to describe this event.
Which means something immense or burdensome, right? Like incredibly difficult to bear.
Exactly. The text states point blank that this shift was engineered specifically as a crucible.
So it wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate psychological filter.
Precisely. It was designed to separate those who would unconditionally obey the messenger from those who would, quote, turn back on their heels.
So the chaos was actually the point. It was a stress test to break the foundational logic of their devotion.
Yeah, it forces the individual to ask themselves a really hard question. Am I praying in this direction because it makes historical sense?
Or because it pleases my neighbors. Or because it just feels emotionally right.
Right. Or am I doing it solely because the divine authority commanded it?
It strips away every single social and logical comfort, and it just leaves raw obedience.
Exactly. It's the absolute centralization of authority. When you strip away the secondary benefits of a religious practice like this social cohesion, you find out what the core motivation actually is.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the text suggests that struggling with this kind of raw, uncompromising divine directive is not a new phenomenon at all.
No, in fact, they draw a direct historical line connecting this struggle in Medina to a much older, much more expansive failure of obedience in the deep past.
All right, they take us to the Israelites standing right on the edge of the Holy Land.
So the narrative takes us all the way back to the aftermath of the Exodus. The Israelites have been delivered from Pharaoh. They've witnessed the parting of the sea.
And now they're encamped, facing the ultimate directive, which is to enter the land of Canaan, specifically the area of Jericho, and claim the Holy Land.
Yeah, and the text details how Moses sends 12 scouts, one leader from each tribe, and the sources specifically preserve the names of figures like Joshua and Caleb.
Right, they're sent to cross over and map out the territory. It's meant to be a tactical prelude to a divinely assured victory.
But when these 12 leaders enter the land, the reality of what they find just completely shatters their psychological resolve.
Yeah, the text described them encountering giants. They call them the Jabberin.
Which is a word that carries the connotation of immense, tyrannical, overwhelming physical power.
Right, exactly. It's not just that they're tall. They are an overwhelming, terrifying force.
So the scouts return, and the psychological contagion of their fear just spreads through the entire camp instantly.
It's total panic. And think about it. This is a community that has literally just watched an empire drown in the sea on their behalf.
Right, but they look at the physical dimensions of these giants, and they just experience this collective, catastrophic failure of faith.
And the language they use in their refusal is stunning in its brazenness.
Oh, it's wild. They don't just ask for more time or like a better strategy. They literally look at Moses and say, "Go you and your Lord and fight. We are sitting right here."
It is an absolute abdication of the covenant.
Yeah.
They weigh the divine promise against the material reality of the giants, and they decide the material reality is, well, more real.
They just cannot see past the physical obstacle. And the consequence of this refusal initiates one of the most structurally fascinating periods in these exegetical texts.
The 40-year wandering in the Tai, the trackless wilderness.
Which, when we usually think of wandering in a wilderness, the immediate association is brutal deprivation.
Right, starvation, exposure, people slowly dying of thirst under the sun.
Exactly. But the text describes a completely different reality. The wilderness of the T is not a place of physical deprivation at all.
No, it's a place of bizarre, hyper-managed, absolute physical provision.
It's crazy. The miracles described here are so specific they almost read like a surreal divine terrarium.
That's a great way to put it. The concept of the wilderness is entirely inverted here. God decrees they'll be lost for 40 years, which is a complete generational cycle. But during that time, every single physical necessity is outsourced to the divine.
Yeah, and the text breaks down the mechanics of this survival ecosystem in painstaking details, starting with their food.
Right, so the community asks Moses what they're going to eat in this barren place, and the response is the manna.
But the text gives us this very specific botanical and physical description. It says the manna would descend and settle onto terenjabin trees,
which historically refers to a type of sweet exudate or resin found on desert shrubs. But the text elevates this into an abundant, miraculous daily bread.
a delicate, sweet sustenance that just simply appears. But of course, human nature is rarely satisfied with mere sustenance.
No, the text continually emphasizes that. They grow tired of the manna and they demand meat.
And in response, they are provided with salwa. The text describes salwa as birds, similar to quails.
But the delivery mechanism is what is so striking. These birds do not need to be hunted.
No, they're described as flying directly into the camp, just presenting themselves to the people.
It's almost absurd in its ease.
Yeah, the sources say the people would literally inspect the birds that flew up to them, slaughter the fat ones for their meals, and then release the thin ones back into the sky.
Right, so they could fly away, fatten up, and return later.
It's a completely closed, perfectly tailored ecological loop. It functions like an interactive, magical grocery store coming directly to their tents.
And this total removal of labor extends to their environment, too, and their clothing.
Oh, the environment control is wild. When they complain about the heat of the desert sun, a permanent, localized cloud is stationed directly above their camp.
It literally moves as they move, shielding them.
And when they complain about the terrifying darkness of the desert night, a massive pillar of light is ignited in the center of their camp. It functions as an eternal divine street lamp.
Regarding water, the text specifies that Moses struck a rock and 12 distinct separate springs gushed forth.
Right, one precisely for each tribe, which entirely eliminates the possibility of resource disputes or infighting.
But the most jarring detail, the one that really just completely defies the laws of material reality, concerns their clothing.
Yes, because they point out that over 40 years, their garments will inevitably rot and tear.
But the text states that not a single piece of clothing tore or wore out for 4 decades.
And even more staggering, and this just blew my mind, the text explicitly claims that as the children in the camp grew taller and wider, their physical garments grew along with them.
Wait, their actual fabric grew?
Yeah. The fabric itself was entirely insulated from the laws of entropy and decay. It just biologically expanded.
Wow. If we connect this to the bigger picture, when you synthesize all of these details, you realize what this environment actually is.
Right.
The physical wilderness has been completely neutralized. There is no agriculture to manage, no hunting, no weaving, no construction, no defense against the elements.
Every single physical anxiety, every survival imperative that normally occupies the human mind has just been surgically removed. It is effectively a cosmic isolation chamber. It makes me think of putting a misbehaving child in a timeout room.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy.
Yeah, but a room where every toy is provided, the temperature is perfect, their favorite meals just appear on a tray, but the door is locked from the outside.
Right.
They are completely catered to, yet fundamentally trapped.
So what does this all mean for the listener?
Well, unlike a child's room where the parent eventually relents after a few hours, the text specifies that this door only unlocks when the entire offending generation physically dies off.
Wow. So it's an enforced extinction event for a specific mindset. Exactly. The physical ease of the tea actually serves to force a brutal psychological confrontation.
Because when you don't have to spend a single second of your day worrying about where your water is coming from or how to mend your clothes,
You're left with an abundance of mental silence. And in that silence, you have nothing to confront but the reality of your own rebellion.
they are forced to sit with the knowledge that the very miracles feeding them every day are the exact same miracles they claimed weren't powerful enough to defeat the giants in Jericho.
The provision is the punishment.
That is so profound. It shows that having all the data or all the tactile proof of the divine literally watching your clothes magically lengthen as you grow doesn't automatically generate the internal courage required to fulfill a divine directive.
It's a devastating critique of the human desire for proof. The texts argue that external miracles, no matter how profound, cannot rewrite a heart that is committed to fear or disobedience.
You can live inside a perfectly calibrated, miraculous bubble and still be wandering in circles.
Exactly. But even when that physical wilderness is finally conquered, when the 40 years expire and the new generation crosses over into the Holy Land,
The internal wilderness remains.
right, the texts show that physical arrival does not equate to spiritual permanence.
Because decades, or perhaps centuries later, that exact same refusal to submit inwardly results in the Israelites losing the absolute center of their spiritual lives.
The Ark of the Covenant, which the text refers to as the Taboot.
And the taboot is perhaps the most heavily charged object in these exegetical traditions. It's not merely a ceremonial box.
No, the texts describe it as containing the physical relics of the family of Moses and Aaron, but more importantly, it houses the Shekinah.
And what exactly does that term denote?
It's a term that implies a profound, heavy, divine tranquility or presence. Historically, the text notes that the Israelites would bring the Ark to the front lines of their battles, and the sheer theological weight of the Shekinah would guarantee their victory.
But the texts outline a period where the society falls into widespread idolatry and moral decay.
Right. And they attempt to wield the Ark in battle against their enemies, the Amalekites, with the text specifically naming Goliath among their ranks.
But they're treating it as a mechanical talisman. They assume the divine presence operates like a battery they can just plug into their war machine, regardless of their own spiritual state.
And that doesn't work. The divine protection is gone. They are slaughtered, and the Ark is captured.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because in the ancient Near Eastern context, the capture of a patron deity's symbol is the ultimate theological decapitation.
Oh, totally. It's a way for the victorious army to prove that their gods have physically overpowered the god of their enemies.
Right. So the Amalekites take the Ark as the ultimate trophy back to their village, a place called Ashdod, and they install it inside their own temple, placing it directly alongside their idols.
And this is where the text turns the Ark into something completely terrifying. It does not just sit there as a passive piece of plundered gold.
No. The very next morning, the priests of Ashdod enter their temple and find all of their idols violently tipped over, resting upside down on their heads.
So they rationalize it, they set the idols back upright.
And the next day, the exact same thing happens. The Ark is exerting an active, kinetic rejection of the idols.
The theology of the text is uncompromising here. The Shekinah, the divine presence, is fundamentally, atomically incompatible with idolatry. It cannot coexist in the same space.
But the Ark's rejection of its captors doesn't just remain a quiet, localized phenomenon inside the temple.
No, the incompatibility violently spills out into the broader society, acting almost like a highly aggressive autoimmune response.
It essentially becomes a radioactive artifact. It's exactly like they stole a highly unstable radioactive core without knowing how to handle it.
That's the perfect way to look at it. They bring it into their city center, put it on a pedestal to show off, and immediately the society starts suffering from catastrophic radiation poisoning.
And the text describes this poisoning as a literal plague of mice that sweeps through Ashdod. But these aren't just, agricultural pests eating their grain silos.
No, the sources explicitly detail a horrific scenario where these mice attack the population in their sleep. They bite them and literally eat them from the inside out.
Oh man, that's intense. Just horrifying.
It really is. The brutality of the plague underscores a central theme. Sacredness cannot be captured, harnessed, or possessed by an opposing force.
The Amalekites physically moved the wooden box, but they could not control the reality of what it represented.
Exactly. The presence of the Ark in a society fundamentally opposed to its nature causes that society to hemorrhage and collapse. The cost of keeping the trophy is total annihilation.
So the terror in Ashdod reaches a breaking point. They realize this object is going to wipe them off the map.
Right, they need to eject the radioactive core from their territory.
So they devise a method. They place the Ark on a wooden cart, and they hitch it to 2 cows, but the text is very specific about these animals.
Yeah, they're unyoked cows.
Meaning beasts that have never been trained to pull a cart, never been steered by a human hand.
And they don't assign a driver to guide them. They simply strike the cows and let them go, hoping they just wander away from the city.
The use of untrained animals is such a deliberate narrative choice, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It removes human agency from the equation entirely. Because if the cart arrives at its proper destination, it cannot be attributed to animal instinct or human navigation.
And the text actually provides the invisible mechanics of the journey. It states that angels literally physically surrounded the cart, driving the untrained cows and guiding the Ark safely back across the borders to the Israelites.
Specifically delivering it to King Talut, or Saul.
It's a stunning sequence. The Israelites couldn't defend it when they were corrupt, the Amalekites couldn't survive holding it, and human hands didn't navigate its return.
The artifact belongs exactly where divine physics dictates it belongs.
But, this cycle of destruction and restoration is really just a prelude to a much more absolute devastation.
Yes. Centuries later, the sources describe a catastrophe that makes the temporary loss of a single artifact seem trivial. Beit al-Maqdis, Jerusalem itself, is utterly annihilated.
The exegetical texts attribute this total destruction to the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, and later expansions reference the Romans.
The physical reality of the devastation is absolute. The temple is burned to the ground, the sacred texts are incinerated, the population is slaughtered or dragged into exile.
The architecture of the city is just reduced to scattered, formless rubble. The sacred center is effectively erased from the earth.
And out of this total erasure, the texts construct one of the most profound philosophical meditations on time and resurrection in all of ancient literature.
It centers on a single figure walking through the ashes of the ruined city.
The Islamic exegetical tradition usually identifies him as Uzair, which is often correlated with the biblical Ezra, though some texts argue it's Jeremiah.
But his name is kind of secondary to his psychological state here,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. He is looking at a landscape of absolute zero. He surveys the shattered stone and the burned earth, and he asks a question that strikes at the very core of human limitation.
He asks, how will God bring this to life after its death?
And it is vital to understand that this is not framed as a rebellious taunt or a statement of atheism.
Right, it's a statement of profound existential despair. His human intellect simply cannot map a trajectory from this level of complete ash back to a functioning, living city.
The mathematics of restoration are beyond his comprehension.
And the divine response to his incomprehension is not a verbal explanation. God doesn't send an angel to lecture him on theology.
Now, God answers his question by subjecting his physical body to the very phenomenon he is questioning.
The text says God causes him to die. He puts him to death for exactly 100 years.
He is forced to become the object lesson. He wanted to know the mechanics of resurrection, so he is plunged into the abyss of time.
And when he is finally awakened, when his consciousness returns to his body, the text details an interrogation.
Right. A voice asks him, "How long have you remained?"
And he measures his experience by the only metric he has, which is the subjective feeling of a nap. And he replies, I have remained a day, or part of a day.
His internal clock registered almost nothing. But then he's instructed to look at the physical evidence around him.
And the text provides this brilliant 3-part juxtaposition of how time operates entirely at the discretion of the divine.
First, God tells him to look at his provisions. When he died, he had a basket of figs and a jug of pressed juice or water.
And after a century of sitting in the open air, the figs have not rotted, the water has not evaporated or spoiled.
For the food, time was simply paused. 100 years passed without leaving a single microscopic trace of decay.
But then the visual shifts to the extreme opposite. God tells him to look at his mount, his donkey.
And the donkey is nothing but a pile of scattered, sun-bleached bones.
So the food experienced 0 time, but the donkey experienced the full, brutal weight of a century of decomposition.
And then, the text described the mechanics of the miracle. Uzair watches as the scattered bones of the donkey literally levitate, assemble themselves in the air, click together at the joints.
And then they're systematically wrapped in nerves, muscles, flesh, and finally skin. Time is rapidly run backwards to reconstruct the animal right before his eyes.
He is seeing time frozen, time accelerated, and time reversed, all in the span of a few feet.
It's incredible, but the true staggering weight of this 100-year gap only hits him when he stands up and walks back into what used to be his life.
Because while the man, the figs, and the donkey were caught in this localized bubble of manipulated physics, the rest of the world kept turning.
The biology of his family continued to march forward, and the math of his family reunion is just the most beautifully absurd thing in the text.
Let's look at the numbers.
Okay, so the man was 40 years old the day he walked through the ruins and died. He is dead for a century, and when he is resurrected, his cellular age is exactly what it was when his heart stopped.
He comes back as a vibrant, physically prime 40-year-old man.
He locates his household, and he finds his son. But his son, who was a young boy when he left, has been aging normally for those 100 years.
Right.
So his son is now 110 years old, and his grandson is 90 years old.
The exegetical traditions actually preserve a poetic, almost riddle-like description of this exact familial paradox.
Oh, I love that part.
It describes a scenario that completely shatters the biological hierarchy of generations. A grandfather, possessing the dark hair and vitality of youth, stands by and watches his own son, an ancient man with a white beard, hobble across the room on a cane.
The 40-year-old father must physically assist his 110-year-old son. The imagery is so jarring.
But this raises an important question. Why 100 years? God could have proven his ability to resurrect the dead by killing Uzair for 10 seconds and putting his donkey back together immediately.
Right, there is no biological necessity for a century-long delay just to make the point.
The 100-year gap is entirely the point. The text reveals that during the century, this man was removed from the timeline. The macro-historical events he despaired over were being resolved.
The Israelites were released from their Babylonian exile, they returned to the region, and they physically rebuilt the city of Jerusalem.
Uzair was put to sleep at the exact moment of the city's death, and he was awakened at the exact moment the city was fully restored to life.
So the resurrection of the man was perfectly mathematically synchronized with the resurrection of the architecture.
Exactly. It demonstrates that divine timelines operate on a scale that completely ignores human impatience.
When we look at a tragedy or a collapsed society or a ruined life, our immediate instinct is to demand a solution within our own subjective, highly limited time frame.
We think in terms of days or perhaps years. The text is illustrating that the divine architecture of history might require a century to balance the ledger.
Time is not a prison that God operates within. Time is a highly elastic tool that is stretched or compressed to facilitate the exact necessary outcome.
Time is elastic.
And that concept of chronological manipulation bridges us perfectly from the macro resurrection of a ruined city down to the micro level.
Because once Jerusalem is rebuilt, the sources zoom their focus all the way in.
We transition from the grand, sweeping histories of exiled nations to the quiet, hyper-specific miracles that occur within the walls of that newly restored holy city.
Specifically, the narrative surrounding the miraculous births of Mary and Jesus.
Right. So the narrative introduces a woman identified as the wife of Imran. She is pregnant, and in her piety, she makes a vow to dedicate her unborn child to be muharrar.
A term meaning legally and physically freed from all worldly domestic obligations in order to serve exclusively in the sweeping and maintenance of the temple in Jerusalem.
And in the cultural context of the time, she naturally assumes the child will be a boy, as temple service was a male domain.
But she gives birth to a girl, Miriam, or Mary.
But the divine accepts the vow regardless of the gender norms of the society. Mary is accepted into temple service and is placed under the guardianship of the prophet Zechariah.
To protect her and facilitate her devotion, Zechariah constructs a highly specific architectural space for her, a mihrab.
An elevated, secluded room or niche within the temple complex, accessible only by climbing a ladder.
And the text describes Mary's existence inside this elevated room as being saturated with continuous localized miracles.
Yeah, the text notes that whenever Zechariah would climb the ladder to check on her provisions, he would find her already supplied with sustenance that defied the laws of agriculture and seasons.
He would find her eating the fresh fruits of summer, in the freezing dead of winter and the fruits of winter during the sweltering heat of summer.
It establishes her immediately as an individual whose very biology is being sustained by an economy outside of normal cause and effect.
But what I find so brilliant about these exegetical sources is that they refuse to let Mary remain an abstract, floating, purely mystical figure.
Right, amidst all these lofty miracles of out-of-season fruit, the text grounds her with an incredibly mundane, sharply human detail.
Mary is a young woman living in a confined space, and the text notes that one day she contracts a case of head lice.
It's such a human detail. It's bothering her, so she needs to leave the sanctity of her mihrab, go outside, wash her hair, and sit in the sun to dry it and comb out the lice.
It is a stunning juxtaposition, the profound vulnerability of the human body. She leaves the temple and withdraws to the eastern side of the mountains to be entirely alone for this basic hygienic task.
And the texts mention the eastern direction, which carries heavy symbolic weight. The east is the direction of the sunrise, of new beginnings, of the dawn breaking.
And it is in this incredibly exposed, utterly mundane moment of dealing with a physical irritant that the ultimate supernatural event occurs.
The angel Gabriel appears to her. And the text does not describe a vague, ethereal light. It describes a highly physical, tactile interaction.
Gabriel takes hold of her garment. The Arabic word used is rud, referring specifically to the collar, the sleeve, or the opening of her shirt at the chest.
And the text says he breathes directly into that opening.
The mechanics of the conception are immediate and absolute. And the pacing of the narrative, which had been slowly detailing her quiet life in the temple, suddenly accelerates to a dizzying, terrifying speed.
Yeah, the sources specify that this is not a standard 9-month human gestation.
The texts suggest that the entire duration of her pregnancy, from the moment of Gabriel's breath to the onset of catastrophic labor pains, lasts precisely 3 hours.
3 hours. Her body is subjected to a biological hyperdrive. The psychological shock of that is unimaginable.
She withdraws in terror and pain to a remote valley, often identified as Bethlehem. And in the absolute peak of her physical agony, isolated and overwhelmed, she collapses against the trunk of a dead, withered palm tree.
And here, the text provides a mirror miracle to her own body. Gabriel calls out to her and instructs her to physically shake the trunk of this dead palm.
Now, this is a piece of wood that has no branches, no green life. It is effectively a petrified log.
But the moment her hands shake it, the visual transformation is instantaneous and cinematic.
The texts slow down to detail the exact sequence of colors and life erupting from the dead wood.
In the blink of an eye, before she can even process what is happening, green fronds burst from the top of the trunk. Then clusters of dates appear.
The sources describe them changing rapidly from pale white to green and then flushing red as they ripen into perfect, fresh dates.
And then they detach and fall gently to the ground right at her feet, perfectly preserved, without a single bruise.
Mary herself recognizes the theological argument being made by the tree. She watches dead wood instantly produce perfect fruit, and she realizes that giving birth without a human father in the span of 3 hours is no more difficult for the divine architecture than forcing a dry log to bleed life.
The external miracle anchors her to the reality of her internal miracle.
And this pattern of incredibly specific, tactile, food-based miracles continues into the ministry of her son Jesus and his interactions with his disciples.
Let's look at the narrative of the table from heaven, known in the text as Al-Ma'idah.
The disciples approach Jesus and ask a question that feels almost audacious given what they have already witnessed. They ask if his Lord is able to send down a literal table of food from heaven for them to eat.
Jesus' initial reaction is to warn them. He tells them to fear God, essentially asking them why they are demanding such a massive, overt tear in the fabric of reality when they already have faith.
But the disciples insist. They argue that their motives are pure. They want to eat from it, to have their hearts entirely put at ease, and to be direct witnesses to the absolute truth.
They are asking for the ultimate, undeniable physical proof of his prophethood.
So Jesus submits to their request. And the physical description of his prayer is incredibly intense.
The texts say he strips off his woolen garments and puts on coarse, black haircloth, the absolute garments of poverty and submission.
He stands with his feet perfectly aligned, bows his head, and weeps with such violence that his tears soak his chest. He prays for a table that will be a festival, a celebration for the first of them and the last of them.
And the sky opens. The sources describe a massive red table descending from the heavens.
It is sandwiched between two clouds, one above it acting as a canopy and one below it. It lowers slowly, visibly, passing through the air until it rests before them.
But the true astonishment in the text is reserved for what is underneath the covering when Jesus finally pulls it back. I am obsessed with the fact that these ancient, majestic texts take the time to give us the exact, hyper-specific menu of the heavenly feast.
When the cover's removed, the centerpiece is a massive roasted fish.
But the text is meticulous. It notes that this fish possesses no scales and no bones, and it is dripping with a rich, fragrant fat.
Surrounding the fish are various types of vegetables. But the text adds a brilliant caveat. There are all kinds of vegetables, except for leeks.
Why no leeks? The exclusion of leeks is a fascinating detail.
Well, leeks, garlic, and onions are pungent, they grow deep in the dirt, and they leave a heavy, lingering odor on the breath. They are deeply associated with the coarse, heavy reality of the earth.
So the heavenly table, by explicitly excluding them, maintains its purity and its separation from the mundane soil.
It's the perfect theological culinary critique.
It really is. Alongside the boneless fish and the leekless vegetables, there is vinegar placed at the head of the fish and salt at its tail.
And surrounding all of this are 7 flat loaves of bread, and resting on top of the bread are olives, fresh dates, and pomegranates. It is a masterpiece of sensory detail.
But the breathtaking menu is paired with a terrifying theological ultimatum.
Yes. The disciples asked for this table so their hearts could be at ease. They needed to digest the miracle, to make the divine tactile.
But God's response to this demand for absolute proof is chilling. The text records the divine voice stating, "I will send it down to you, but whoever disbelieves after this, I will punish him with a punishment I have not given to anyone else in the world."
It is the ultimate double-edged sword. When you demand the veil of reality be pulled back and the divine actually complies, you forfeit the right to ever doubt again.
The margin for human error, for uncertainty, for spiritual stumbling is permanently erased. Once you eat the fish from heaven, any subsequent disobedience is treason.
It highlights the massive burden of knowledge. And this concept, the pursuit of absolute truth and the heavy price it exacts on the human life, is the perfect transition to the final and perhaps most deeply resonant narrative in our stack of sources.
We have been examining the grand, sweeping movements of prophets and nations. But the text narrows its focus to a deeply intimate, biographical account of one single, ordinary human being trying to find his way to that truth.
The epic, continent-spanning quest of a man named Solomon the Persian.
Solomon's narrative grounds all of these cosmic, sky-breaking miracles in the dirt of human endurance.
According to the exegetical traditions, Solomon is born into the highest echelons of Persian society. He is the son of a Diqan in a region called Ram-Hormuz.
To understand what he walks away from, you have to understand the title of Diqan. In the Sassanid Persian Empire, a Diqan was a wealthy, land-owning feudal lord.
They were the aristocracy, controlling vast agricultural estates and wielding significant local power.
Solomon is born into a life of absolute material luxury and guaranteed status. Culturally, his family practices the traditional religion of the empire, Zoroastrianism, which the text describes as the worship of fire.
His father is so overwhelmingly protective of his prized son that the text notes he kept Solomon locked inside their palatial home, sheltered like a young girl, to ensure he was never exposed to danger or outside influence.
But the bubble bursts. One day, his father is too busy to manage a specific estate and sends Solomon out to inspect the lands.
On his way, Solomon's path diverges. He passes by a Christian church, or in some iterations of the text, a cave complex inhabited by ascetic monks.
He hears the sound of their chanting, their prayers. Intrigued, he steps inside, and what he witnesses completely upends his internal world.
He spends the entire day sitting with them, entirely forgetting his father's estate. When he finally returns home that night, he tells his father with terrifying honesty, "The religion of these people is better than ours."
His father's reaction is violent and immediate. The ideological threat is too great. The text says his father physically binds Solomon, placing him in heavy chains, and locks him away in the house.
Wait, his own dad put him in chains?
Yeah, literal heavy chains. And the threat extends outward. The father threatens to literally burn the monks alive if they do not immediately flee the region.
Solomon is presented with the ultimate binary choice: submit to his chains and inherit an empire of wealth, or abandon everything for a truth he barely understands.
Solomon chooses the truth. He manages to smuggle a message to the monks before they flee, begging them to send word if a merchant caravan ever passes through, heading towards Syria or Mosul, the geographic heartlands of this ascetic tradition.
When the word finally comes, Solomon physically breaks his chains. He turns his back on his inheritance, his family, and his nobility, and he embeds himself in the caravan, fleeing into the unknown.
What follows is a grueling, decades-long marathon of serial apprenticeship.
Selman arrives in Syria and attaches himself to the leading figures of this ascetic Christian tradition. And the text provides incredibly vivid descriptions of the men he studies under.
These are not scholars sitting in comfortable libraries. These are hardcore desert ascetics.
They live in caves, they wear rough wool, they fast continuously through the day, and they stand in prayer throughout the freezing nights. Selman mirrors their discipline, absorbing every ounce of their theological knowledge.
And he witnesses their connection to the divine firsthand. The text recounts a moment where Selman is traveling with one of his mentors near Jerusalem.
They pass a paralyzed man, begging at the door of the sanctuary. The mentor initially walks past, but then returns, takes the paralyzed man by the hand, and utters an invocation in the name of God.
And right in front of Selman's eyes, the man's paralysis vanishes. He stands up, completely healed, and walks away. Selman knows he is tracking the real kinetic power of the divine.
But the tragedy of Selman's quest is the fragility of human life. His mentors are deeply pious, but they are mortal.
One by one, they age and die. And every time a mentor approaches death, Selman is described kneeling by their bedside, gripped by a frantic theological anxiety.
Asking, "To whom are you leaving me? Who is left that holds to this exact path? I will not leave you."
He is terrifyingly aware that the thread of truth he's following is fraying, held by fewer and fewer hands.
Finally, he is in the region of Amuria with his last surviving mentor. As this old man lies dying, Selman asks the familiar, desperate question.
And the monk gives him an answer that changes the trajectory of his life forever. The monk says, essentially, there is no one left. The men who held to the pure path have all passed away. But do not despair, because the time is imminent for the emergence of a new prophet.
The monk gives Selman a highly specific geographic and physical map to find this final prophet.
He tells Selman that this man will emerge in the land of the Arabs. He will eventually migrate to a specific city, a city situated between two tracts of black volcanic rock filled with date palms.
And to ensure Selman isn't deceived by false claimants, the monk gives him 3 absolute, undeniable criteria.
First, this prophet will accept and eat gifts. Second, he will absolutely refuse to consume anything given as charity.
And third, he will carry a physical mark, the seal of prophecy, between his shoulder blades.
Armed with these 3 data points, Selman buries his final friend and sets out for the Arabian Peninsula.
He finds a group of Arab merchants from the Kalb tribe and pays them the last of his remaining wealth, some cows and sheep he had acquired, to guide him.
But the moment they reach an isolated valley called Wadi al-Qura, the merchants betray him. They strip him of his possessions and sell him into slavery.
The son of a Persian lord, a man who has spent decades hunting to the divine, is now human property, sold to a Jewish man who transports him to Yathrib, the oasis city that will soon be known as Medina.
The irony and the providence of his enslavement are stunning. His betrayal is exactly what transports him to the specific city of date palms between 2 volcanic tracts that his mentor described.
He is planted right where he needs to be, but he is trapped in hard labor.
The text describes a moment where Selman is high up in the fronds of a date palm working for his master when he overhears a conversation below him.
His master is discussing the arrival of a man in the city who claims to be a prophet.
The text notes that Selman is so violently overcome by this news that he begins to shake, nearly falling out of the tree directly onto his master's head.
He scrambles down and immediately initiates the 3-part testing sequence his mentor gave him.
He gathers a handful of dates he had saved, approaches Muhammad, and says, "I see you are a stranger here. These dates are a charity for you and your companions."
Muhammad accepts the dates, hands them to his companions to eat, but firmly keeps his own hands away. He does not consume a single bite of the charity. The first sign is confirmed.
Selman returns to his labor, his heart pounding. Days later, he returns with another handful of dates.
This time he says, "I noticed you do not eat charity. These dates are a gift to honor you."
This time, Muhammad accepts them and eats them alongside his companions. The second sign is confirmed.
The tension is excruciating. Selman only needs the final sign.
The text describes him following behind Muhammad during a funeral procession, desperately trying to catch a glimpse of the man's back.
Muhammad, realizing what this former Persian noble-turned-slave is trying to do, deliberately lowers his cloak.
And there, between his shoulders, Selman sees the seal of prophecy, exactly as the monk in Amuria had described it decades earlier.
It is the emotional eruption of a lifetime of suppressed anxiety. The text says Solomon throws himself upon the prophet, kissing him and weeping uncontrollably.
The decades of wandering, the freezing caves, the loss of his mentors, the brutality of slavery, it all instantly resolves in this singular moment of recognition.
But the exegetical sources, in their profound wisdom, do not end the story on a simple triumphant note. They introduce a moment of devastating theological heartbreak.
After Solomon embraces his new reality, he sits with Muhammad and begins to recount his entire journey.
He talks passionately about the Christian monks who taught him. He describes their fasting, their prayers, their miracles, and their unwavering devotion to God.
Salman deeply loves these dead men, and he asks Muhammad what their eternal fate is.
Given the strict theological boundaries of the new revelation, the initial answer provided to Solomon is crushing. He is told that because those monks did not live to follow this final message, they are in the fire.
You can feel the air leave Solomon lungs. The text explicitly states that this answer fell upon Solomon like a crushing weight.
These were the men who saved him from fire worship. These were the men who pointed him toward Medina.
The idea that they were damned was a theological agony he could barely withstand.
But the narrative provides a magnificent cosmos-balancing resolution.
The text states that in direct response to Solomon's overwhelming grief, a specific verse of the Quran is revealed, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 62.
This verse explicitly decrees that those who were Jews or Christians or Sabians, anyone who truly believed in God on the last day and did righteous deeds according to the light they had in their own specific time before the new revelation arrived, will have their full reward with their Lord.
They will have no fear, nor will they grieve. It is a massive exhalation of relief.
The text tells us this verse was revealed specifically to stitch Solomon's broken heart back together. It validates not just his final destination, but his entire journey.
It honors the righteous men operating in the twilight between prophets. Solomon's story takes all the grand, terrifying themes we've discussed, divine obedience, shifting qiblas, wandering in the wilderness, and distills them into a single, beautiful human life.
Solomon's journey is essentially the journey anyone takes when they realize the default answers they grew up with simply aren't enough, and they're willing to pay any price to find the truth.
So, what does this all mean for you? Looking across this entire stack of sources, the overarching architecture is just breathtaking.
We have mapped the social fracture of turning a community 180 degrees to face a new Qibla.
We have analyzed the psychological terror of a wilderness that caters to your every physical need while starving your soul.
We have seen the active, radioactive violence of the Ark, rejecting idolatry.
We have watched a man sleep for a century just to understand how God rebuilds a broken city.
We have observed the biological hyperdrive of Mary bringing forth life and the heavy burden placed upon disciples who demanded to eat a miracle.
And finally, we followed Solomon across empires. When you lay all of these narratives out, they force us to confront how we view our own lives.
We are so desperate to have everything happen on our terms, on our schedule.
We want the instant solution, the immediate proof, the fast-track timeline. But these ancient texts suggest that the divine operates on a completely different metric.
If there's one profound, provocative thought I want you to sit with, it is the absolute elasticity of time in these traditions.
Time is never a fixed constraint in these texts. It stretches and compresses entirely based on what the human soul requires for its own transformation.
We see a 40-year wandering that acts as a slow-burning spiritual pressure cooker.
We see 100-year sleep that passes in the blink of an eye to synchronize a man with a rebuilt city.
We see a 3-hour pregnancy that defies all biology.
And we see a man endure decades of slavery and searching just to find his truth in a handful of dates.
How profoundly might our own lives change if we stopped viewing our personal timelines as rigid, failing schedules?
We constantly torment ourselves. I should have achieved this by 30. I should be healed from this by now. I am running out of time.
What if we viewed our lives the way these texts view history, as perfectly tailored, beautifully elastic periods of growth?
Sometimes you're granted a 3-hour miracle where everything changes instantly.
And sometimes you just have to sit in the wilderness or wander through the desert or serve in slavery for decades until your soul is actually ready to recognize the truth when it finally appears.
It completely destroys the need for a clean, linear chronology. It asks us to trust the elasticity of our own journey.
And that is a much more forgiving, much more beautiful landscape to navigate.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the timelines, keep exploring the texts, and keep seeking the truth wherever it leads you.